Universities are not just ivory towers. Our role is to provide with good solutions for the big challenges that the world has.
Welcome to the Future of Universities podcast series by UIN Media. I'm Todd Davey, and in today's episode, we tackle the question of what sort of role universities will play in the future, including their role as a place for discourse, and we'll also introduce the concept of liquid learning. Don't forget to share our podcast with your colleagues and leave us any comments. It's my great pleasure today to welcome a guest from who's the president of IE University, which is one of the leading universities in Europe. His name is Santiago Iñiguez, and he has been a recipient, the first recipient, in fact, of the Founders Award by Thinkers 50, which is a prestigious global ranking of thought leaders in management. He's the author of The Learning Curve, how business schools are reinventing the education, and really looking forward to discussing that particular topic with you today, Santiago. There are many other accolades, which I'm sure it would take me about 5 minutes to list all of them. So what we might do is we might just jump straight into it and kick it off with the first question. One of the things that maybe it's useful for everybody present and all those listening to this as a podcast, it would be useful for you to know that Santiago has provided a really interesting contribution as part of the university during times of crisis edition of the Future University Thought Book series. It's a series that we've been running now since 2018, and there's been 5 editions until now. And the recent contribution that Santiago provided a lot of thought-provoking material, and I guess we wanted to take this opportunity today to share some of the insights from that contribution that he made, but also explore it in much more depth. And I think a fireside chat like this is a perfect way of doing that. So maybe if I just start with a broader question, Santiago. I think you touched on many topics within your contribution, and I guess that it was talking about not only the role that universities might play in society, but also in education, and we'll unpack that as we go through today. But I really wanted to hear from your perspective. How do you see the university's role presently in society, and maybe also going forward, how do you see that role?
Well, first, thanks very much for having me here, Todd, and congratulations for the series of podcasts and, of course, for the publication. Well, I guess you are touching a very important question. What I believe is that education is the key engine for the transformation of society. So the more you focus on educational efforts, the more you invest in education, the better society you may reach in terms of preparation, in terms of civility, in terms of orientation towards the challenges of the global world. There's a very clear correlation, and this is actually shown by many different surveys and studies. Those countries and nations that have the better educational systems, they perform better in terms of the economy, in terms of inclusion and integration into society, in terms of entrepreneurship. So the role of universities, I guess, in the current very challenging world is actually to help the different societies and countries where they operate to become more peaceful, more wealthy, more inclusive, more just, more fair societies. This is a big challenge because I realize that we are living in times of lots of turbulence and challenges, wars, climate change, which is probably something neglected by many people, but it's actually becoming probably the most serious challenge for the global population. And at the same time, dealing with all the SDGs that United Nations has identified very clearly. So universities are not just ivory towers where thoughtful people or wise academics gather, in order to produce arcane research that is of no interest for the outside world. This happened, at the origin when universities were monasteries, but now they are embedded in the society. So our role, I guess, is to provide with good solutions for the big challenges that the world has, to produce research that is of impact, and that we can actually develop also the best possible graduates in order that they transform the world for the better.
Fantastic. One of the things I wanted to pick up was just some of the points that you made about how the universities support the societies in which they exist. I just wanted to bring it back down to a more practical level. Maybe you can talk through what you're currently doing at IE University and just talk a little bit about how you're stretching the boundaries of what a traditional university has done.
Sure. Thanks very much for the question. I guess we are lucky on a number of respects, and I very much, respect my peers, my colleagues, those who are presidents and rectors or vice chancellors at public and private universities with a long tradition. We are a university quite young, just 12 years old. We were founded by a business school, and I guess that spirit of good management has produced an imprint, is very much visible in our culture, in our governance, the way we operate. And my response, for those who are looking to change universities so that they become more impactful and relevant for society, is that we probably need to adapt many different institutions, which is what we tried at IE University. The fact that we were young and modern and new and starting from scratch allowed us to reinvent many different things. So, for example, our governance system is more business oriented. We are a non-for-profit institution by law, so we reinvest all the profits that the activity generates, but at the same time, we take decisions more like a company than in the collegial way that most universities operate. This provides us with a speed which is very distinctive. We can actually respond to the demands from the outside world in a much quicker fashion than any other university. Just to give you an example, some years ago, we launched a joint degree with a leading American university. It took them 3 years to pass the final approval by the congregation and the faculty senate and the different departments. So the first 2 cohorts weren't able to get their degree, whereas it took us just, a question of weeks. So if universities have to respond to the actual needs of society, they need to operate like other organizations quickly, and collegiality is one of those institutions which probably needs some rethinking, and needs to be revisited. The same applies to tenure. The fact is, at IE University, we have a single faculty, so we try to avoid the silos that exist at some other centers in terms of getting too much specialized and focusing on very concrete things, sometimes of non-relevance to the outside world. What we favor is cross-disciplinary research, that our professors actually think about the questions from different angles. We were, to some extent, a maverick university, thinking about new ways to develop research and to develop also teaching and learning. To some extent, I guess we are disruptors, which in the academic world is something which is not seen, with good eyes many times. In fact, I recall, a comment which was inserted in one of the accreditation reports in the early days of our business school. A leading accreditation agency described us as an opportunistic. This is an opportunistic business school. Of course, you all know that business schools teach business students to become opportunistic, to seize opportunities. This is the key thing about entrepreneurship. And criticizing an academic institution for being opportunistic is nonsense. So this is what I mean by rethinking and reinventing a number of university and academic institutions: tenure, governance, finance, promotion, the relevance of research. Those are things, that we have discussed a long time about, and that are in need of revision. We need to, allow me the expression, to sacrifice some sacred cows that have been, living for a long time. And we at IE, well, we have that spirit of actually dealing with problems in the way that can actually be solved. We have now 5 different schools that work together in collaboration. The one that I expect to grow faster in the coming years is the School of Science and Technology, which is focusing on developing programs that link with the actual needs at companies. And what we try, I guess, is to bring the best of the different worlds. I mean, we combine the liberal arts tradition, which is prevalent in the Anglo-Saxon world, this preparation on the humanities that provides a very good basis for becoming a cosmopolitan citizen, with specialization and relevance to jump into jobs and in the labor market. No? We try, to provide also a good preparation in management, regardless your degree. For example, architects, they need to develop their projects in time and budget. And there's this idealistic, conception of architecture as if they were starry creators that they are not responsive to anyone. So having a good sense of management is relevant for any profession. And the same applies to the humanities. Having a very good preparation on history and, geography and the different cultures also provides a very good basis for becoming, the best possible professional.
It's interesting because we often see this repeated, that the origins of a school or a university often play out and echo through the generations. We've seen multiple examples of where business has been involved in the creation of the university, even over 100 years ago. And to this day, they retain those sort of values, places such as Coventry University, for example. But I had a question, because I can see that in some ways, having started with a business school, there's the heart of a business school. So maybe a really practical question for whether they're leaders of universities or those working within universities. How can we support this movement to a faster way of doing things in a university? Are there some things that we can do? Does it start at the top, or can we as a professional working within a university, can we influence that, and how?
That's a
$1 million question.
I mean, it's doable. Let's be very honest. It's doable if there's willingness to make it the change, no? But universities and education at large, is a very hot potato for most governments. No government wants to see students demonstrating on the streets. So every time you touch, and unfortunately, every time you announce a reform at a university in order to make them more competitive institutions, the different stakeholders, mobilize themselves in order to get on the streets and, oppose any potential reform. So public universities have this problem. I mean, the fact that, governments, we need, more, a much more, business orientation on the side of the public administration. But there's a number of things that are doable. And we find examples actually across the world. Universities that, for example, experiment with different tracks for their faculty members. And there's some examples in the US. Years ago, talking about adjunct professors was something close to anathema, because those who enter the class should have, the academic pedigree. They should hold a PhD in the discipline they were teaching and publish on journals of that discipline and so on. Today, fortunately, many universities count on the contribution of adjuncts who bring fresh knowledge from their experience, and this adds enormous, potential for the learning process. So this is a way, for example, for changing things. Of course, revisiting tenure and the criteria that are behind tenure. This, of course, requires, on the side of academia, to do some sort of harakiri. and asking, people who are enjoying a good status, to make themselves the harakiri is something quite difficult. But at the same time, most academics are born with some generosity. So if you appeal actually at their prior instincts, they normally respond in the best possible way. I guess, there's a need of changing different things. So if we count on the one hand with the willingness of academics and major stakeholders, and of course the support of the government, then the change is doable. No, I guess we are starting to see things happening across the board.
I think it's an interesting comment you made about harikuri, because in an innovation sense, it's often the question is raised: is it better to cannibalize yourself or be taken out of the market by competition? And I think it's a question for universities generally. Are you willing to maybe lose an arm or a part of your body, but to be stronger and to be able to exist going forward? There's some fantastic insights. Thank you for sharing those. I wanted to explore just a little bit more about some of the roles that you have mentioned in your contribution, because I think they're quite interesting. So, for example, you cited the renowned fellow from Oxford, John Henry Newman. Who said universities are an assemblage of strangers from all parts in one spot. So I guess my question is around the role of universities as a place to meet and providing a location for discourse. One of your comments was a more just, equal, prosperous and sustainable world. So I just wanted to explore that a little bit more. How do you see the role of the university as a place to meet and have this discourse?
That's a very interesting question. As you realize, it's a very hot topic these days, causing many academic officers, to step down or to present their resignation. So what I hope is that my testimony here, doesn't actually cause my resignation. But the way I see it very much, in the same way as Cardinal Newman saw it in the 19th century, at a time when probably the society didn't have the same cultural challenges. There were lots of challenges. And Oxford was already, a place where many different people from many quarters were actually attending, both teaching positions as well as holding the position of students. But originally, if you think about universities at the time of their foundation in Europe in the 13th century, and you think about the centers of excellence that existed at that time, those were Paris, Salamanca here in Spain, Bologna, Oxford, of course. The Latin was the language of delivery, was the vehicular language, So you could find, Aquinas teaching in Paris and in Bologna in Latin, moving around. At that time, the monks, the Black Friars, were actually the founders of many of those universities. But there was debate and dialogue. We sometimes see, the Middle Ages as the Dark Ages, but the fact is that they discussed about many different things, including theology. And that should be the spirit of universities. There's no dogma. Of course, there's things and there's methods. So you shouldn't contradict facts that are proven, that are evident. But things about opinion or concepts that are open for many different conceptions should be the subject for debate. Concepts such as, allow me to put some examples, justice, inclusion, diversity, are concepts which require implementation, and they may allow for different conceptions. Let me just put another example. I guess we are all feminists. If feminism means defending equal rights for men and women, who should oppose this? If anyone opposes this, I wouldn't be able, to sit and debate with that person. No? The question lies actually on how we can implement that ideal. I mean, how do we achieve, that equality of rights between men and women? So I, for example, defend affirmative action as a way to change things in a quicker way. And in fact, here at IE, we have selectively hired women over the years in order to have a balanced faculty body today. The business school, for example, has 48% of women on our faculty, on the entire faculty, which means that we are probably a significant number of points above the rest of our peer institutions. This is not the result of luck or coincidence. It's actually the result of careful search, and exercising affirmative action. In a similar way to what happened, in the 70s in Scandinavian countries, where they decided, to put quotas, and this has resulted over the decades in an increasing, an equal number of women actually at governments in Finland, Sweden, Norway, or if you look at boards, it's the same thing. So if we want to enhance inclusion across different companies, boards, universities, then we should care for inclusion and take the necessary measures, whatever it takes, in terms of criteria for admissions, quotas. Having said this, and of course, these demands revisiting again, the admissions criteria, SAT, exams, and many other institutions again. What I wonder is how we could preserve freedom of expression on campus so that everybody can actually say freely what they think legitimately, but at the same time preserve respect for others, tolerance, not just tolerating others, but actually embracing diversity. And I realize, that there's lots of things that may clash here. And let me tell you very clearly, if I can impede a fascist coming on campus and talking, in front of students, then I will do my best in order to impede that. Is this a restriction of the freedom of expression, on campus? Well, it's not. I may not win. There's checks and balances, at institutions, but being the president, I guess I have the duty, to preserve the best possible atmosphere, and also to make all the stakeholders free but safe on the same environment. So I will take any possible measure in order to provide room for open debate and for people to express their ideas in the language that they think, is respectful and the best possible way to convey their ideas. But at the same time, if I can, with my power, if I can impede someone who defends things, that are beyond liberal democracy and some other values, the rule of law that we all respect, I will do that. No, I don't think this is restricting freedom of expression. You probably recall John Rawls, the philosopher, the American philosopher, who raised the question in A Theory of Justice: should we be tolerant with the intolerant? And the question here, well, I will try to do my best in order that the intolerant, don't actually win the scene.
It's a very difficult, in some ways, discussion. There's some really, I think you've had a lot of courage in the way that you've expressed that. I really appreciate that, because it's not an easy discussion to have, and many universities are grappling with exactly the same issue. I just wanted to take a small step further into a practical realm, and I just wondered, is there anything that you have done at IE where you would describe, is it like an event format, or is it something you embed in your principles within the educational degrees that you have? How do you then live and breathe that at IE?
Well, we have a student government, which is actually very much involved in running extracurricular activities. As I was telling you, we have implemented a number of initiatives in order to reach a balanced faculty. We also provide a very diverse student body. We have 140 different nationalities on campus. And this brings, for example, people from all continents. Some of them, most of them actually, particularly those who are coming from emerging countries, having scholarships, either half or full. We very much push for a very diverse student body, because we believe that that is part of the learning process, learning from people who think and live differently, but living in respect with each other is something that the students get as one of the major lessons from the whole experience. So this, again, is not something out of a coincidence. It's the result of having a network of 30 different offices worldwide that are in contact with institutions, with candidates, and that recruit actively in order to have a very diverse student body. So I guess diversity is very much felt and breathed, on IE University campus. In fact, if you ask applicants about what is their first reason for choosing IE, they normally respond in an unsolicited way that is actually diversity, what they were looking for. I guess that this is something which makes us quite distinctive. So it's not something that we need to artificially implement. It's actually coming bottom up, top down. We are all the time, revisiting procedures and structures in order to favor and bring in more diversity angles, no? And this is actually reflected in many different decisions that we take.
One of the comments that you made in your contribution was around the notion of liquid learning, something that you were embedding in IE. I think another way of describing is hybrid learning. I wondered if you could just discuss that concept and also how you're doing that at IE.
Yeah, we refer, by liquid learning, we refer to providing the most personalized learning experience, which may include different things. For example, assessing what are your needs in terms of development. And this applies not just for undergraduate students, but also to master's degree students and, of course, executive education. You know that at our university, we cover all the different segments from the early years while you're at university up to executive education, lifelong education, since in time and given, the aging phenomenon, most of the population in the future will be composed of adults. So there we need also to develop schemes in order that upskilling, reskilling become procedures, employed by universities and companies in order to make mature professionals still be, very much active and innovative in the workforce. But if I think of liquid learning, I would probably touch at least 2 points. One is formats and methodologies. And we have been active in hybrid formats over the past 20 years. From the very beginning, what we realized is that the main advantage, the king, as they used to say, was not the platform. There was a discussion 20 years ago about whether, content is king or whether platform is king. And what we realized, from the perspective of education was that neither content nor platform were kings, but rather, the emperor was the experience. So it's the way you combine technology, apps, the platform, digital content, and you bring the faculty in and the program staff, and you build up routines that replicate or even improve the learning process in the best possible way. So what we have discovered over time is that probably the best methodology in terms of learning results is hybrid formats. For example, let me just put you, a sample of this. If you run, I always emphasize, blended formats. It's not just online forms of delivery. It's not, of course, massive forms of delivery, tutor-led. Here we are talking about employing the same faculty and preparing professors to teach online as they were doing, an in-presence class. So what I mean, for example, let me just put you an example of how this methodology produces much better results. In blended programs, and I teach on that sort of classes, You mix all sorts of people. They interact synchronous and asynchronous via streaming, via in classroom, in presence sessions. And what you discover is that those extroverts, those who are more vocal, no, and participative, normally take the floor, as you probably realize, in traditional classroom settings. They are more prepared. And sometimes, this is linked also with cultures, because there's some educational systems that favor that extroversion and that participation. Americans, clearly, in comparison, let's say, with Asians. Then what you discover when you employ both synchronous and asynchronous, including fora, again, led by the faculty, what you discover is that the introverts participate much more, on fora and other forms of delivery. And the synergies are very clear, because sometimes introverts are more creative than the more extroverted, the ones that react more promptly. So the results of the discussion in class, using, for example, the case method, are much richer. The class gets much more cohesive. They know each other deeper than in a traditional class setting. The interaction is more intellectual, not just, allow me the expression, animal, because in a traditional classroom setting, of course, there's this animal feedback, which is needed at some time, no? But when we deal using different forms and formats, then we exercise all the different, capabilities, intellectual capabilities. So the learning process becomes much, much more richer. If you train the faculty to manage all those formats and to become comfortable using different platforms and managing, let's say, a class by streaming, by using a script and ordering the class. So, it's not just a person, talking on the screen, but it becomes the best possible replica of a meeting. Then the whole experience, becomes fantastic. This is what we are doing now, even, introducing the metaverse and exploring, potential applications of the new technology. So this is the first consequence of liquid learning, putting into practice many different formats and enhancing the learning experience. And second, as I was mentioning before, personalization. What we plan is to assess the needs, the skills, the capabilities of each candidate, and try to focus on how we can enhance all the potential of each student. Traditionally, education was a form of standardization. Everybody has to get, the same level of knowledge. The good thing about technology today is that they offer the possibility of potentiating the individual, their capabilities, their strengths and skills to the best, no? And this is what we are now trying to do.
Thank you for listening to today's discussion. Stay tuned for the next episode of the Future of Universities podcast series by UIN Media. Don't forget to sign up for UIN's podcast newsletter at uin.org or follow us on LinkedIn.